Hey, what's going on? This is Body Punch Podcast, and my name is Naz. Let's talk about MMA news. I know I started this podcast by saying that we're going to talk about MMA news, but what an interesting year for fight sports. Boxing, MMA, we've seen the triangle ring in Triller with that boxing hybrid style. Basically, it's boxing with a little bit longer clinches. But what an interesting year how each one of these sports has navigated the pandemic. Not just the individual sports as a whole, but also including all of the promotions that are involved. The UFC with their Apex, Bellator going to those casinos where they're allowed to basically do anything. And then other organizations, which include both Bellator and the UFC, going to different locations like Florida, the UFC going to Abu Dhabi. What a way our sport has navigated the choppy waters of COVID. It was a little bit touch and go at the beginning in 2019. I think a lot of organizations caught a stride in 2021, and we're moving on to 2022. But we got a couple things in the news that we still need to talk about. One of them being the last event that the UFC is going to hold before the end of the year, which is Derrick Lewis versus Daukaus. And we're going to talk about that after. But first, I wanted to talk about something that I think is very important, something that is very much a part of the news cycle right now, something that I think is a real, it's a massive subject, and I've been really interested in it, and I think it is, and I know it is actually Kayla Harrison, and what her situation could be in the new year. Now, she told Brian Campbell of Morning Combat, where he was speaking on his podcast, where he said that she wanted to make a decision by the end of the year, or by the end of the month, excuse me. So at the end of this month of December, she really wants to make a decision. But that conversation was before Juliana Pena shocked the world and defeated Amanda Nunes for her belt. Not her featherweight belt, but obviously that 135-pound belt. And because of that, it may have hurt the chances that Kayla Harrison would sign with the UFC. Now, just to go over the preliminary stuff, just so we're all on the same page, officially, Kayla Harrison was saying that she didn't want to sign with the UFC. She had a lot of options open. She was looking at the UFC, but when Dana White made his comments and said that she wouldn't last here, it would be a really tough situation for her at the UFC, just trying to play mind games. I think she retaliated back and said that, oh, well, I'm not that interested either. Fast forward, I have no idea what happened, but all of a sudden, it seems like some behind the scenes action occurred, and Kayla Harrison is now very much open to signing with the UFC. Dana White, in his post-fight press conference after UFC 269, talked about how they're inching closer to signing Kayla Harrison, how he's interested in signing Kayla Harrison. but I don't think he saw the reaction that Kayla Harrison had after Amanda Nunes lost her belt. It looked like a little bit of shock and horror. She was surprised, like everybody. I was screaming. Me personally, I lost my voice watching that fight. It was incredible. So I couldn't imagine being in the arena and watching it itself. But at the end of the day, it does put a little bit of a dent in what Kayla Harrison's options could be in the new year. Now, she's still a free agent. She's still looking around. Bellator is still a vital or a very important option. It's something that gives the opportunity to fight Chris Cyborg. It also presents a bunch of other fighters. It also has a little bit of comfortability because there aren't so many. It's not. I'm not saying it's not the big leagues, but it's not the big leagues. It's not the UFC. The UFC has well established fighters, not at 145 in the women's division, but they're always looking for the new and upcomers. And I'm sure the UFC would love for her to try and cut down in weight and try and make a lower weight class. It might have to be a catch weight. They might have to make a new division just around her. But I think this is so interesting to watch how it's unfolding because it literally took a 360 turn. And at the beginning of this conversation, it seemed like Kayla Harrison would either re-sign with the PFL, which is I keep on saying vital, but it's an important, it's a very concrete. It makes sense. At the end of the day, the LFA just makes sense for her. It's where she's comfortable. It's where she's winning these $1 million purses at the end of these tournaments all the time. It's almost a guarantee, unless they sign someone, which in this point and what we're seeing with the free agents right now, it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. So Kayla Harrison is very comfortable in LFA or in PFL. Excuse me. And I think that Bellator is a good option. But just, I think everybody just wants to see her in the UFC. And I think to her point, and I'm sure her agent, Ali Abdelaziz, also shares this sentiment that yes, I guess the front end money is very high in these other organizations. But the sponsorships that you get in the UFC, the recognition that you get in the UFC, just all of those things packaged together might make the deal a little bit more sweet and might make Kayla Harrison sign with the UFC. And why are we all pushing this so much? I mean, I think this is a little bit of the Ben Askren situation. Before Ben Askren got knocked out by Jorge Masvidal by that brutal flying knee. Before that, Ben Askren was legitimately someone who people were worried would never fight in the UFC, would never bring his talents over, even to the States, after his run in Bellator and other organizations. But when he was in one championship, people were just worried that there was a guy out there that would not be able to show his talents in the best organization, which is the UFC. So Ben Askren had a big target on his back. A lot of people wanted him. I'm sure the UFC wanted him in the moment. And it didn't look like Dana White was really budging. Ben Askren and Dana White did have their little skirmish, did have their little beef, but they were able to resolve that. They were able to conduct business. They were able to sign a deal. And Ben Askren did come to the UFC by being traded for Demetrius Johnson. We all know the story. But the reason why I'm bringing it up, it's very similar to Kayla Harrison's. We're not at the point where she's signed yet, and we don't know her true potential in the UFC. But there is a boogeyman out there, or boogie woman. And it's not Joanna Jędrzejczyk right now. It's Kayla Harrison. And she's outside of the UFC. And a lot of people want to see where she's at. Because even if we look at the competition that she's facing in the UFC, or outside of the UFC in PFL, she's making great money. She's elevating her name. But I'm going through the list of people that she's fought. And out of the 12 total wins that she's had, none of these people, aside from maybe Brittany Elkin, and I'm just going, maybe Courtney King, and then that's kind of it. Aside from that, not many of these ladies are very recognizable. Not many of them are going to be the Holly Holmes, maybe if Misha Tate can make 145, Amanda Nunes, Megan Anderson, even though she's a free agent, I'm not exactly sure where she's going. Those high level women's fighters in featherweight. And I think even featherweight is going to be a tough cut for her. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's going to be a tough cut for her. But fighting, she was fighting at lightweight in the PFL. That's another thing that we might be forgetting. That the PFL allows her to fight at lightweight. And even though the UFC is very interested, she's only fought once, I believe, at featherweight. So we know that she's able to make the weight if she really wants to. But does she really want to all the time? That's another question that she has to, question herself about. Ask herself about, does she really want this? Is this really in the cards for her for a long-term contract? Right? Like she's not going to fight she's not going to sign anything super short. It's going to be something that's going to go for a little while, and she's going to have to make that 145-pound weight. Another thing is that, and this is just to mention why I think this is such an important topic and why it's such a timely topic, is because of all the mentions that Dana White gave her, all the mentions that everybody in the arena was giving. But I think it was mostly the broadcast. The broadcast that the UFC puts out is so scheduled, methodically combed through with a fine tooth comb. And they know every second that's going to happen, unless it's Khabib Nurmagomedov jumping out of the cage. Aside from that kind of stuff, they know every second of what's going on. They know when to play the promotional material, the trailers, whatever lower thirds, anything that pops up, they know what's going on. And for them to shout out and have even the announcers shout out Kayla Harrison and have her do her thing in front of the camera is very special. It's a real Easter egg. It's a real nod to what may be coming. It's also giving Kayla Harrison a taste of what UFC life would be like. Again, going back to Ben Askren. The first time Ben Askren came in front of the camera and showed his face at a UFC event, I remember the pop that he got. Joe Rogan even pointed it out. He said that this guy, people were saying that he was an unknown, and the crowd, everybody in that arena knew who Ben Askren was. I think that sometimes, and this might be a lot, I think that we dumb down the average MMA fan. We think that they don't know who Kayla Harrison is. We think that they don't know who, I don't know, name a Bellator champion. Name a Bellator fighter that's at the top of the food chain. We think that the regular fan doesn't know who that is. But 9 times out of 10, they know who that person is. Bellator, it might be even in PFL, the men's division, like Rory McDonald. I would say he's an MMA household name. I think he needs to fight a lot more. He's not at the top of the food chain. But there you go. We have a couple names that are outside of the organization that a lot of people know about. And I think Kayla Harrison is turning into one of those people. On top of that, being the head person at ATT, being around all of those UFC fighters, being around Amanda Nunes, her teammate, who we forget is her teammate, and seeing her lose and she's obviously seeing something every day in that gym that either makes her a little bit worried to face Amanda Nunes or even more worried that what Juliana Pena did, of course it wasn't a fluke. Of course it wasn't. I'm not saying that. But it gives her a good gauge. It gives her a good barometer of what is possible at that weight class. And even Amanda Nunes being knocked out and choked out, it might put some thoughts in Kayla Harris's mind that, hey, maybe this UFC thing is not really the way I want to go. I'm not saying that she's scared or anything, but it might not be the money fight that Amanda Nunes presented at the time when she was undefeated in her title run. But what a fun story. What a fun thing to cover and to look over. So at the beginning of the podcast, I talked about that I wanted to talk about UFC Fight Night, December 18th. We got the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, coming back. The always fun Knockout King versus Chris Daukaus. This is going to be December 18th. It's going to be a fun one. This card is one of those that is a low-key stacked card. One of those real fun ones that, and especially the last event of the year. I think this is one that we all have to watch out for. This is one that's got some real fighters on here, meaning that some of these are you can't miss fights. Just to name a few, obviously we got Derrick Lewis, who we all know him for those amazing knockouts, for those amazing, just the great fights, the great post-fight interviews that he has. We got Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on this card. We got Bilal Muhammad on this card, Angela Hill, Diego Ferreira, one of my favorites, Cub Swanson, versus one of my favorites, Derrick the Damage Elkins. In the prelims, interestingly enough, we have Justin Tafa. I've always loved him. Hopefully he can get a win. And, Harry is really good as well. But just saying that Justin Tafa is on a little bit of a skid. Hopefully he doesn't get his 3 fights lost. We got Raquel Pennington, former challenger, and she's the 3rd fight on the prelims. So I think this is a great card. Eubanks is on this card as well. She's always fun to watch. Gerald Mershaw is on this card. And Gerald Mershaw, and I hope your first fight watching him wasn't the one where he got knocked out brutally, but we all know how special he is, what kind of fights he puts on. Okay, so let's talk about all of these fights. Let's go through some of them. Let's talk about Derrick Lewis versus Chris Daukaus. Um, like I said at the top of this section of the podcast, Derrick Lewis, always fun to watch. Knockout King versus Chris Daukaus. Derrick Lewis has been on kind of a run. It's been a little bit shaky at some points. Last fight was a loss against Cyril Gane, but he did get a couple great wins actually versus Curtis Blades, the wrestler who everybody is scared of in that heavyweight division. Oleinik, Ilir Latifi, I believe that was his first fight in heavyweight. At lightweight, he was a monster. Losing to the top of the food chain, JDS, he lost to Daniel Cormier in 2018 in New York. What a big venue, what a big card that was. And to lose in that is it's not like you can really you can't really say much against that, right? It's Daniel Cormier at the end of the day. But his last fight was a loss to the person who's going to be challenging for the belt next. So that makes you a little bit, more happy. Obviously you don't want to ever lose, but when the guy that you lost to is fighting for the belt next, I mean, it does give you a little bit of barometer of where you're at in the division. Obviously, we know that Derrick Lewis has fought the champion before. One of the least active fights ever in the UFC. But we all know why. Both of these guys can throw bombs. I'm talking about the champion and Derrick Lewis, and both of them were worried about that situation. Now, I think that the interesting part about this fight is the fact that Derrick Lewis, number 3, is fighting Chris Daukaus, number 7. He had a great win, TKO win, against his opponent Shamail at UFC 266, which was in December. You could see how elusive he was. If you haven't watched him fight, I would totally recommend watching him fight. I believe that the UFC did post one of those free fight fight clips or whatever on their YouTube page. But he also defeated Oleinik and a couple other great wins. He's been on a really good run. 5 fights won so far in a row. His last fight was in Cage FC, Cage Fury, and that was in 2019. After that, he won another one in Cage Fury. Then he went to the UFC. This is going to be his 5th fight in the UFC. And his last 3 fights, he's got performance of the night. So he's really exciting to watch. If you watch his last fight, he had a lot of great movement in that fight. You could see that he's very clean. He's very crisp when he fights, especially for heavyweight. We just saw the 155-pound champion defeat Dustin Poirier. A lot of those same points could be applied to Chris Daukaus. Obviously, he does have some heavyweight tendencies where he just throws some crazy bombs and muscles his way through some stuff. But the in and out movement that he showed was, I think, really important. It's bringing in this new era of heavyweight fighters like Cyril Gane. I think Chris Daukaus is like that. Obviously, I think Cyril Gane is a little bit more mobile. He's a little bit more in and out movement. He's using a lot more of the stances that the lower weight divisions use. But I think that Chris Daukaus, the movement that he has, the attitude that he has, at one point Shamil was trying to give him a fist bump, but Chris slapped it away, gave him the middle finger, and then kept on fighting. And in that round, the second round, well, in the first round, he clipped him real bad. The camera angle didn't show it properly at first, but Chris clipped him real bad, and it was really close. It looked like it only touched a hair on his beard, but when the replay switched angles, you got him clean on the jaw, all the spit flying and all that kind of stuff, and then dropped him. And then in the second round, I think that the attitude that he has, the in and out movement that he has, the reset that he has, whenever he throws a punch, he always has his hands up. His hands up are on defense. His hands up are on offense. He doesn't have the crazy trunk movement that we see in boxing, but we won't see that in MMA that much. He has a lot more of that in and out movement, skipping in, skipping out. And I think it's great movement, especially for the heavyweight division. I think it freezes a lot of his opponents. They're like, what the heck's going on here? I haven't seen a heavyweight do this. And especially when fighters are training for that sort of thing, it's hard to find training partners for that. Like I said, Derrick Lewis, knockout king. We all know what he's going to do at this point now. His cardio has got a lot better, but at the end of the day, this guy is just looking for the knockout. This guy has had some times where he's been taken down and he wasn't able to get back up. He just kind of laid there. The Daniel Cormier fight comes to mind. But, he's improving, especially in his takedown defense. And I think that Chris Daukaus is a perfect fight for him. I think it's a good fight for both of these guys. If you think about it, the in and out movement really could be a key factor for Chris winning because of the movement of Derrick Lewis, or the lack of it sometimes. And then for Derrick Lewis, it's someone that wants to stand and trade and is really hyper aggressive. So I think it's a good thing for both of these fighters. I think it's going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be a great fight, especially whoever wins is going to win in a devastating way. Let's look at the other fights on the card quickly. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is taking on Bilal Muhammad. Bilal Muhammad, he is coming off his last fight where he got that win against Damian Maia. Some of the crowd was booing in that fight, which I thought was unfortunate, especially if you know that Damian Maia is so dangerous on the ground. There were some points where Damian Maia was just kind of like, when a kid like grabs onto your leg and you're dragging him across the room. He was just trying to get Bilal Muhammad down to the ground. He was just, I don't know, he was using all of his force to take him down. Before that, it was a very controversial Leon Edwards fight. It was Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad, UFC Fight Night, March 2021. There was that gruesome eye poke against Bilal Muhammad, and it was considered a no contest. Very unfortunate situation, but he came back in June with that Damian Maia win. But before that, he's facing some good fighters. Diego Lima, Lyman Good. He lost to Jeff Neal. We just saw Jeff Neal fight, even though it wasn't the best fight. But you could see the talent that Jeff Neal possesses. Even his coaches were screaming at him that they know that they have a better fighter than that. But Jeff Neal, he is the real deal, and to lose to him is no big deal. The next, Bilal Muhammad facing the UFC veteran, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, aka Stephen Wonderman Thompson. He's getting up there in age. I mean, he is, how old is he now? He's 38. So, which is not like super old compared to the heavyweights, compared to the heavier weights, but for this 170-pound division to be in the game for so long, and his only knockout loss so far has been against Anthony Showtime Pettis. And I believe that was Showtime's last fight in the UFC. And that was that one where he pushed his back up against the cage and then went in for that Superman punch off the rebound. But then he came back and won against Vicente Luque, won against Jeff Neal, who we were just talking about, but then lost to Gilbert Burns. I mean, I think this is one of those things where you're losing to the top of the food chain, but you're winning against the people that you're supposed to win against. Jeff Neal, a striker, a guy that fancies himself a striker. You win against Vicente Luque. He likes to throw bombs. We know his jiu-jitsu is great, but if you go into a firefight with him, he's down to fight. And he won against him. Darren Till, Anthony Pettis, those are getting at the top of the food chain. The Darren Till fight, I know it was a unanimous decision win, but from what I recall, the fight in 2018 was a little bit, it wasn't controversial. It was just, it was a tough fight for both of them. And Till missing weight didn't help the situation at all. And then Wonderboy still took the fight. It was in Liverpool. They really wanted to, they still really wanted to fight. So they had a catchweight bout at 175 and a half, which may have played a favor in that fight. It was an unfortunate situation, and but it goes down in the record books. That's the worst part about it. But then before that, he defeated George Masvidal, lost to Tyron Woodley, had that back and forth with Tyron Woodley having the draw at first, but then throughout all of these fights, he's still a dangerous opponent. He's still one of the trickiest strikers that you will ever see in the UFC, and he's a tough fight for anybody. Okay, so I'll go quickly through the rest of the fights. I think you got to watch out for Angela Hill's fight. Angela Hill, number 12, but still, especially she's gaining a lot of popularity. She's winning a lot more of her fights. And I mean, I think this is someone that you just got to look out for in this division. Yeah, she did lose her last fight against Tisha Torres, but Tisha Torres, you can't ever count her out. No matter how many fights that she's lost, you can't ever count her out. Then Ricky Simone, you always got to watch out for him. The bantamweight division is on fire, and you have to look out for each one of these prospects that are in this division. Not just prospects. He's unranked at the moment, but he is somewhat well established. Diego Ferreira, Cub Swanson versus Derrick Elkins. I think it's a great fight for these two veterans. It might be some of their last fights. I think we just got to take this opportunity and really live in the moment. It might be one of the last times we see either one of these guys fight, because Cub Swanson is still fighting the top of his food chain fighters. Giga was just a tough test for him. And he's someone that's just going to fly through the division. And it's no use being worried about losing to Giga. And he's not. Derrick the Damage Elkins is on a nice 2-fight winning streak. He's one of those fighters that gets busted up like the Nate and Nick. You could throw a piece of paper at the guy and he'll start bleeding. And he always is down for an amazing fight. He's always there. to put on the damage and get the damage. So I think it's going to be a fun fight. Kyle Washington versus Derrick Elkins. Okay, so we got to watch out for this middleweight bout. Jeremy Shaw is in this fight. Let's see how he does. I know he did have a fight after his Hamza Chimaev fight, and he won 2 of those fights by submission. But a lot of people just have it in the back of their mind that he lost in such spectacular fashion to Hamza Chimaev. That guy's on a run, but we still got to watch out for Jeremy Shaw. He was on a run before he met up with Hamza Chimaev, and what an amazing grappler. So watch out for his grappling ability. If it goes to the ground, I think it'd be a fun one. Justin Tafa, I just love the way that he fights. He's so aggressive. He comes from that Bam Bam camp, also that Mark Hunt camp. I believe he does. Even if he doesn't, he still fights like them, and they're some of my favorite fighters to watch. Heavyweight bout. He's one of those smaller guys that likes being in the heavyweight division and going against those big boys, and I love it. It's the greatest. Raquel Pennington, let's just watch out for this fight because at the end of the day, it's a former challenger, and she's number 3 in this card. And on top of that, making her, she's fighting in the featherweight division, which is a division that is not well stacked up, meaning there aren't that many fighters in that division. And we need more bodies in that division, especially if Kayla Harrison might be joining, if anybody might be joining. We just need more bodies in that division. And having a former challenger is such a big deal. Massive. So we got to watch out for that one. Okay, so those are all the fights that I wanted to talk about for this last UFC event for the year of 2021. I think it was a great year of fights. We'll talk more about it. We'll talk more this week. I think it was really enjoyable going through the whole card. I think this is a fun low-key card that we got to watch out for. Okay, so I really appreciate you listening to the podcast. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell notification if you're watching this on YouTube. Also leave a comment down below. Send me an email. Whatever you want. Let's get in contact. Let's talk about these fights. Let's talk about Kayla Harrison. Let's talk about anything you want when it's in regards to fighting. Please listen to the podcast on the different podcast networks. Rate, review, follow, subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, any of them. We're on there. You can listen to us wherever you are. I really appreciate it again that you're listening to me talk and taking the time out of your day. And I really appreciate it again. Thank you so much. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Nas. Bye.